Everything is Black and White Podcast live on the Chronicle NUFC Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter pages, and later on our podcast channel. If you're watching live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, do get into the comments and put your questions to myself or our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. And if you're listening on the podcast channel, please remember to like and follow. It just helps us get the episodes out to a wider audience. Aaron, Newcastle beat Brentford 5-1 up at St James's Park. Fantastic result. Not the best of performances, I didn't think, and we'll get into that as we get into the show. But the scoreline was brilliant. The crowd certainly enjoyed it, and it was just nice to see Newcastle win by such a large number of goals.
Yeah, good to see them win in a convincing fashion after what was, a shaky start of the game. Good to see that they've put 9 goals past 2 opponents in the last 2 weeks without really having, all their attacking players back fit and firing. So, as you've just alluded to there, I think, there is better to come. I don't think it was a vintage performance, but it was certainly a very good one and one that Eddie Howe was pleased with. The challenge now is just making sure they keep it up.
Yeah, I thought they were quite sloppy at times, especially in the first half, guilty of giving the ball away, mistimed passes. I thought there were a couple of players who didn't perform overly well, and they relied on the top level players such as Bruno and Trippier to get them really. I don't want to say out of a hole because it wasn't that bad, but they were sloppy, and I do think against better sides that they will get punished. On the flip side, I thought what was really important from Newcastle's point of view is that they punished Brentford for their mistakes. So while Newcastle weren't at their best, it's refreshing because we know the best is yet to come, and they're still winning 5-1 when they are making a few sloppy mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was going to be one of those games when Brentford took the lead early on before that VAR call. I thought it was going to be, another home game where they sort of fail to, capitalise and make it. But as you said, they're really encouraging to see them actually taking their chances this time after what we saw at Bournemouth and Palace. I thought the first half, the first section of the first half was a bit, as you say, a bit sloppy. There wasn't too much energy, but I thought as soon as they got that first and second goal, it never really looked in doubt. And I think when Brentford scored that penalty, it was in a period of the game where Brentford were actually growing into it. So I think Bruno getting his second goal of the game and the third really killed it. And it was good to see them react, so soon after conceding.
Yeah, you mentioned there the goal that was not a goal from Brentford's point of view. And over the last few weeks, from being complainers of VAR, we're now probably celebrating VAR because of the decisions have finally been going Newcastle United's way. It was one of those where the referee had to go to the monitor to determine whether Ivan Toney was involved in play. He made the right call, and I think that it was clearly a huge decision, a huge moment in the game, because at that point, with the context of what Saturday was, the first game marking the anniversary of the takeover, I think the goal behind to a goal relatively early on, would Newcastle maybe struggle to get back into the game, perhaps?
Yeah, potentially. I think we've seen sometimes at St James's Park this season that the crowd hasn't been able to pick the players up, and I think the start of that game was a little bit flat. I think when Brentford scored, it was quite a good team goal by Brentford, but the defence were caught a bit flat-footed. So they did have a stroke of luck, making sure with the VAR calling disallowing the goal. So look, absolutely fantastic response after that. When it went back to 0-0, absolutely wasted no time getting the first goal. Brilliant set piece routine, and then obviously capitalising on that mistake to make it 2-0 before half time. So yeah, look, not a vintage performance, not like some of them we've seen under Howe, the likes of Arsenal and stuff like that. But I think still a very, very good game, and one that needs to be sort of praised for them.
We've got the comment here from Kev, and he says it's nice to have the qualities in the side now that we can grind out results. And it seems in many ways strange to be saying that when Newcastle have won 5-1, but I do think the performance was one of those when Newcastle did have to really, really kind of work at it, because they were sloppy at times. And as I've mentioned, I think against better sides, against maybe a Brighton or the top side, the sides above, like Liverpool, Man City, they will get punished for giving the ball away. And someone's mentioned Longstaff there, saying he was sloppy. I agree. I thought Dan Burn didn't have the best of games either. But what you did have is you had players like Bruno and Trippier stepping up and really showing their quality. And I think on Saturday what we saw the level of those two. They've really set the bar. They're just two exceptional players. And for me, those two, when they're on form together, Newcastle are a scary force.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, everybody's waxing lyrical about Bruno, as there should be. But it does sort of feel like Trippier as maybe the unsung hero of Saturday's win. He was, as we're going to go on to in more detail in a bit, he was picking the players up when things were going wrong. He was very, very vocal throughout. And, while Bruno provides a lot going forward, Trippier is really the man that organises that defence at the back when he's got that captain's armband on.
Steve Hinton there saying Bruno was great. He was fantastic, and you can see why there's been links to Real Madrid and Juventus, but he said after the game that he wants to be a legend at Newcastle, and you can see that he's already halfway to being one. You have written a piece over the weekend, Aaron, about Newcastle United's best ever midfielder. There's a survey running on chroniclelive.co.uk where hundreds of you guys have already shared your view on who Newcastle's best midfielder is. There are a couple of players I think people would say are missing from that list, but there's the likes of Rob Lee, Johan Cabaye. I did actually hear someone on Saturday say, imagine if Cabaye was in this side. I mean, it would be nearly an untouchable centre midfield partnership. But Bruno, we go back to the point about Newcastle having to grind out results, and you're going to rely on players like him to have that moment of quality. It turned out on Saturday he had quite a few moments of quality. And he just, he led from the front, and two really, really good goals, and two different goals as well, which I think is important. It shows that variety within his armoury.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, it's quite striking the fact that he's been here 9 months, hasn't played all the games, and yet we're still all of a sudden talking about him being, potentially the best midfielder that a lot of us have ever seen in a Newcastle shirt. Now, I got quite a funny text off my mate midway through the game on Saturday. He was sat up in level 7 watching the game, and after Bruno's second, he texted me saying, Bruno Guimaraes makes Johan Cabaye look like Matty Patterson. Now, for anyone watching or listening who doesn't know who Matty Patterson is, he played about 10 games for Newcastle about 15 years ago, but he is really all of a sudden surpassing fantastic servants of this football club after, like I say, only being there 9 months. I think
I'm gonna just come in with a bit of caution, because as ever, I think let's just keep the feet on the ground. He had a fantastic game, but I remember when we were bigging him up, and was it against Brighton? I know could he just come back from injury, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it was Brighton
he didn't have the best of games there. You've got to remember, he's only human. He's not Superman as much as we might think he is. And I think a little bit like it was with Fulham, a little bit, I think we've got to apply it here as well. They've won 5-1. Players had a good game, but it's Manchester United next week. The same players who won Newcastle that game on Saturday may have a bad game against Manchester United. You just got to, we just got to not get too far ahead of ourselves. And I think consistency is the key word. And if in the next 3 or 4 games it's still at this level, the players are still putting the ball in the back of the net, Newcastle have picked up X amount of points, then maybe you can get out the bunting.
But do you think he's been consistent so far? I would say he has. I think over the 9 months.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Over the time. Yeah. But I think, he's still going to have that ability to have a bad game, and it's just about getting the balance right. It's getting that he's not always going to play that well. And actually, someone said to me on Saturday evening that they didn't think Bruno was as good as he has been in other games. He scored 2, but they thought he was still sloppy in possession in times, and he was making the wrong decisions in the first half. And yet he's come out with this man of the match performance. Now, this is the beauty of it. It's all about opinions, isn't it?
100%, definitely. 100% it is. But I mean, I think even before that second goal went in from Bruno, I think that first half was him at his best. And I was watching the first half when Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff and Jacob Murphy were running at Brentford's defence with the ball, and they didn't really look phased. Whereas when he picks up the ball, it just feels like there's just this ball of energy around him, and you just think players just don't want to get near him. And I think even before that second goal went in from Bruno, I thought he was having a really good game. I've watched that third Newcastle goal back a lot of times already, and the graft he puts in to chase that ball back, win the tackle, and then thinks, I'm going to go myself. I completely understand what you're saying about people getting ahead of themselves. I personally don't know if he's the best midfielder I've ever seen in a Newcastle shirt. I think he's certainly in the debate, but I just think we've paid 36 million for a player who already looks like he could be world class now and potentially in the future.
I think our colleague Ross Gregory made an interesting point when he put his view out on the survey, and he said he picked Rob Lee because he was consistent over a decade now. You know, these days we know players stopping at clubs for that amount of time is a very, very rare thing. And if you're talking in terms of ability, then many people would say, well, Bruno is better than Rob Lee. But the consistency is the key. You know, when Yohan Cabaye left Newcastle to go to PSG and then out to Palace, he never reached the heights, in my view, that he had reached at Newcastle. So it's all about consistency over a long period of time. The best players will be consistent over 4, 5, 6 years. I'm not saying come back to us in 6 years' time and then then I'll get the button out for Bruno. But I think that's the interesting point. It's about, you know, just not looking at the last 9 months and saying, oh, he's the best player we've ever seen. Let's look at it in a year, 2 years' time, 18 months, you know, when there's a more rounded picture.
Well, I certainly hope he's here in the next 12 months, because I think obviously we had those sort of rumours to Real Madrid in the summer. How true we don't really know. You're looking at his performances now in this team, and you think if Newcastle somehow don't manage to finish, 6th or 7th or 8th this season, is a club going to think, you know what, we can take Bruno Guimaraes? And look, he's came out over the weekend, done a really good interview. He spoke to Lee Ryder on Saturday and said that he wants to become a legend here at the club, but money talks. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, they're big clubs to turn down. And my only worry is that Newcastle don't progress at the rate Bruno progresses, and you end up losing them. Now, look, it might not happen, but I think we need to, we need to save from while he's here for sure.
And just before anyone writes in and calls me a miserable so-and-so, I do think Bruno Guimaraes is absolutely mint. I'm just trying to keep everyone's feet.
Just playing devil's advocate, aren't
you?
Yeah,
that's the right word. That's the right word. We mentioned Trippier. For me, on Saturday, he put in a man of the match performance. I know everyone's given it to Bruno, and of course, he will do 2 goals and what have you. But Trippier, he's just an unbelievable player. He's 32 as well, and he's playing out there like he's a 26, 27-year-old. It's going to be really interesting to see how fit he can keep himself, and and how long Newcastle can have him as a first choice right back at the levels they want to go to. I hope it is, for the next couple of years at the very least. But Saturday just reaffirmed to me what a fantastic leader he is. I was sat in the corner of the East Stand Leazers bit, and so you get to see quite a good view. And I got to see a lot of Trippier in that first half and what he was doing, just talking to players, directing them. It's no surprise that Miggy, I think, has come on leaps and bounds under his kind of stewardship, playing behind him. But there was other things like just patting people on the back, applauding Nick Pope when the penalty went in. Straight away, he's there, he's clapping his hands. Come on. There was a moment, I've written a piece about this on Chronicle Live, when Botman makes a clearance and it turns out that the strike actually is quite tame, and it would have just trickled into the hands of Pope, and Pope's kind of like, he didn't need to do that. Botman's looks up at him as he's on the floor, and he's like, he looks a bit dejected. And Trippier goes over to him, pushes him on the back, helps him up, and then gives him another shove on his chest. And it's like, come on, that needed to happen. You were doing what a good defender does. You were making sure, because you weren't to know that shot was going to be tame. You were just putting safety first, getting it out. And it's them little moments, I think, when it could go the other way. Botman could switch off for that corner that he conceded. It's them little moments of experience where Trippier is just making sure everyone's switched on, everyone's feeling like they've done a good job, and it's paying dividend. Because honestly, I could go on all afternoon about just how good of a player off the ball he is. We're not even talking yet about that assist. we're talking off the ball.
Well, this has been our sort of mini debate in the office today between me and yourself, isn't it, as to who should get man of the match. Bruno.
I think it's me against the whole Newcastle United fan base, to be honest.
Yeah, I think someone's just wrote in the comments there, they're glad that you clarified that Bruno was mint, because it sounded like you weren't impressed. But yeah, look, Trippier, fantastic. Look, it was always going to happen that he was going to get the armband when Lascelles wasn't in the team, and I think we know why. Eddie Howe rates him so highly, as you say, off the ball. Just an absolute brilliant motivator of player. As someone's mentioned in the comments here, Stephen Hinton says he reads the game so well, and he really does from right back. You can see he's constantly keeping that line in check. He's constantly keeping Cher and Botman and even Matt Targett in check. Absolutely fantastic. I feel like, I've just been talking there about potentially losing Bruno. I feel like in Trippier, we've got someone who's going to probably see out his career here. He's already got the armband. He's already a fan favourite. And you made a very good point in the office today that actually, we need to get him in on the coach and set up as soon as he finishes.
You get him a new contract, and you say, look, here's a coaching position for when you're ready to hang up your boots, because the difference he will make to an academy, to a first team as a coach, I think will be unbelievable. But like I say, hopefully that's 2 or 3 years down the line if he keeps fit. But yeah, it's just, and he knows how to wind the opposition up. You saw him getting into Tony's face, trying to delay the spot kick, things like that. That I think when we're talking about Trent Alexander-Arnold in terms of the England position fullback, that is another element, another kind of was it feather in Trippier's hat, which will put him above the Liverpool fullback, because it's that experience and that know-how of just to wind the opposition up, or just how to encourage your teammates and just be vocal. That's what Trippier brings.
Yeah, he does really, and I think as we've touched on, Eddie Howe really likes him, and Southgate too. You can see why he's been in and around that England team for so long. And Billy Gaddis here has just asked a question in the comments about why sort of the national media don't really mention Trips when they're talking about England's best right back. And I think it's a fair question, because look, England have got a fantastic pool of right backs. Reece James is absolutely fantastic. Trent Alexander-Arnold on his day going forward is really, really world class. And then obviously you've got Kyle Walker and obviously Trips. So I don't think it's an anti-Newcastle bias or anything like that that's being suggested, but I just think he's up against a really tough category there, isn't he? And we all know how good he is. We see him week in, week out, but he's fighting some really, really good players to get in that England side.
I don't think it's an anti-Newcastle bias. I do think it's a little bit disrespectful though, to him, because it's all about Alexander-Arnold. It's all about him, but it's not about whether can Kieran Trippier deservedly get ahead of him. That's never the focus, and it should be. You look at the form. If you're going on form, Trippier's ahead of everyone we've mentioned there.
Yeah.
If you're going on ability, then it gets a little bit closer. Is Kyle Walker better than Kieran Trippier? You could potentially argue so.
For me, I think it goes in terms of pure ability. I think you'd have Reece James is probably the best right back England have. I think then you've probably got Trips, and then Walker and Alexander-Arnold can probably fight it out.
But then you see the focus is the other way around. It's the bottom two that you've named there is the top two.
No, this may be where Billy has a point, is that if Trippier was still playing for Spurs, would he get mentioned more? Does he only fall so far down in the conversation because he's at Castle? I don't know. But look, touch wood, he stays fit. We know he had a little bit of an issue Saturday when he went down after the first goal. Hopefully he sees through that. Hopefully, he goes, has a good World Cup. And we can enjoy a fully fit Kieran Trippier at the end of the season.
Honestly, man, I just what a player.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. And somebody's made a great point there. I think it's Kev Donnelly in the comments saying Trippier is the best piece of business we've done. And I think a lot of people will say Bruno. A lot of people
without Trippier, there wouldn't be a Bruno.
Exactly. Yeah, everybody makes the point, and it's so true that he was the first to take the leap. He left Atletico Madrid, where he was playing week in, week out, Champions League football, trying to win La Liga, to come to what was a relegation threat on Newcastle at the time, and he sort of was the first building block in this new foundation.
And we're not even talking about Trippier's ability on the pitch. We saw on Saturday, defensively strong, doesn't dive in, he just tracks and he times the tackle perfectly. He's good on the ball. He had the most touches on Saturday. His pass accuracy was second highest behind only Bruno Guimaraes, and there was only one pass in it. and then the assist for Bruno's goal was quite something. And again, I was in the corner there, and one of the things that stood out was Trippier's actually got to take that corner. Bruno runs over and he just points to himself, and then Bruno runs into on the edge of the box. Almiron then swaps with Trippier, and Trippier gets the ball and whips that fantastic crossing. But the first thing there is that communication between the players, and the fact that they've worked on the training ground on this. It was clearly a well-worked routine. Previous managers at Newcastle, I mean, one's been sacked today. It is, well, not his current club anymore. But, that kind of thing probably never even came into the mind.
No, 100%. And I think, we asked Eddie Howe about it in the press conference after, and we asked him, as to whether a set piece coach had been hired, and he said, no, it's all Jason Tyndall. He said, I've got to praise Jason for the work he's done. And he did say that was straight off the training ground. I mean, for Trippier to do that ball first time, to get it literally pinpoint on Bruno's head.
It's one thing to get in the position and all that, but to actually be that clinical with the plan it shows you the levels Newcastle United are going to.
Yeah.
And what a cross.
Yeah, brilliant. And I thought, we've seen it, for 9 months now with Trippier, what he adds going forward with those crosses into the box. He's just, as you say, brilliant off the pitch, brilliant as a leader and a mentor, but actually, even at 32, he's still really, really a top-class player.
And if you search Trippier on Twitter, you'll see a video that a fan has posted of Trippier watching the VAR monitor as the referee goes over to see whether Tony's goal deserves to be chalked off. And it's another example of Trippier just doing what he does best. He watches it once and then you can hear him, he's offside, and he's laughing, and then he knows. Then he turns around as the referee disallows it and just says to the players, like, calm down, let's get organized, because at that moment, it's another moment that's in the balance. Okay, you haven't conceded a goal, but you'll still be your most vulnerable. You've got to make sure that when you restart, you set up and you're ready to go. And he does it, and it is literally just a couple of gestures. He saw his hands go down, and then he does a little swirl in the air, and he just gets them all organized. And it's great to see. It's great to see that happening. You see it with other players as well. You saw Callum Wilson doing it for the penalty. He was he pointed to his forehead as Tony stepped up to say, just focus. Obviously he's thinking, if this gets saved, we get the ball, we get up the pitch. You've got it all over the pitch. Bruno coming to Trippier and saying, right, let's do this corner routine, is another example of this leadership, which has been lacking in Newcastle for many years. And often it would only be Jamal Lascelles talking or Matt Ritchie, and now you've got it in abundance.
Yeah, and I think, you've touched Bruno there. I think his English is getting better. He's grown in stature in the dressing room along with Trippier. Joelinton, I wrote a piece on Saturday, and it was just about Joelinton. He started on the bench, but myself and Kieran Kelly were watching them come off the pitch, and Joelinton had his arm around Willock, giving him words of advice. He was talking to Miggy before they came on. They've got some big names in this dressing room now, big, players who have got big voice and leaders. And yeah, Trippier, as you say, was sort of the start of that when he came in January.
It's interesting you mentioned Joelinton, because when Trippier was coming back from his injury last season, he was doing exactly the same. He's warming up, but he was telling, players where to go. He was telling Kraft, you've got to get in that position. And you think about Joelinton, and someone's mentioned Miggy here in the comments about how well he's been coached under Howe. And we'll talk about that in a second, but I think you've got to look at Joelinton as well, because Joelinton of old would not be doing that. Joelinton of old would be out there 2 minutes, do a little jog, do a few stretches, back to the bench. He's just another player like Miggy who has just come on leaps and bounds under Eddie Howe, and it's amazing to see that he's found a voice, Joelinton.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we've all seen Joelinton's transformation on the pitch, but, he clearly now is another player who's been improving his English, making a valid effort to do that. And he's now grown into this big dressing room figure, who is helping Miggy. Miggy is, for me, the next one behind Joelinton and Kraft, who has really now transformed his career under Eddie Howe. I mean, this time 12 months ago, if we're talking about Miggy, how we're talking about him now, a lot of people would have thinking would be going mental. So, really, really good from Joelinton to see that, that sort of leadership. I thought Miggy is just, we need to just bottle whatever he's feeling right now, because he's playing really, really, really well, and he's very, very confident at the minute. I mean, 2 or 3 minutes in that game on Saturday. He's cutting inside. He's whipping a fantastic shot towards goal. He was driving at the Brentford defence with real purpose rather than just running down a blind alley. And John Steele here in the comment, I don't want to lose this comment because he wrote it a few minutes ago. He said, what were your thoughts on Murphy? Now, credit where it's due. I think Murphy's been better the last 2 games. We've given him a lot of stick. Most of the fan base has thought, he doesn't really have a future at the club. He's been thrown in for the last 2 games, and I actually thought, he was much, much better on Saturday.
Really good to see him get a goal, and it's been refreshing to see these players who have really needed goals getting them. And first of all, absolute selfless from Callum Wilson to square that.
Brilliant, yeah.
And then Murphy's got to. I mean, I have to say, in that moment it was going to Murphy, I was thinking he's gonna put this. He's not going to dink it.
It was like that. It was like that Torres spell, wasn't it, where he took it round the keeper and put it wide, and he just thought he's never going to score.
Through the legs, never in doubt. Yeah. But just on Miggy, I mean, look, it's no secret that I'm one of his biggest fans.
The member of the fan club, yeah.
I am taking applications for the Everything is Black and White podcast, Miguel Almiron fan club. I'm nearly at air capacity. And you're right, right from the start, he was just up for that game. But what I absolutely loved on Saturday was every time the ball goes out, especially in the first half, he's running over, he's picking it up, he wants to take the early throw in. He just wanted to keep the game going and going. And that's, I would think, installed in him by Eddie Howe is, let's not have too many breaks in play unless we really need it. But just Almiron wanted the game to continue. He wanted the ball all the time as well, which is so refreshing to see. And the important thing is now we're seeing end product. We are seeing him actually doing something. And you mentioned there the cutting on the left foot. How many times have we seen him cut in on the left foot and then take one touch too many?
Or pass it
when he should shoot and not have that confidence. And the difference is the confidence. It's as simple as that. He is on this wave of confidence. And do you know what? That shot there, if it had blazed high into the Leazer's end, I wouldn't have actually minded. Because what I want to see him doing, and what I want to see with Joe Willock as well, drive forward, but then don't get the box and lose your legs. Take a shot at goal. If it goes wide, it goes wide. If one of these will go in, it's better than then passing it sideways and then losing the attack.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the one thing we've criticised Miggy on, I will hold my hands up more than anyone, has probably said he needs to improve his finishing and his end product, and he has, and look, Eddie Howe touched on it earlier this week. He, more than anyone, is a big confidence player. He needs to be on that good run. And look, he's done more than enough to keep his spot in this team. Now, we've spent weeks talking about they need another attacker and they need another thing in. If he can continue this form into the World Cup, it means there's not as much pressure on the club to sign a right midfielder in January for me.
Important that he got a goal, I think, against Brentford, because what we've seen is we've seen him score before and then he goes on another run of not scoring. And it didn't matter how it came on Saturday, whether it was that absolute worldie of an effort that the keeper produced a great save, or whether it was the way he got his goal in the end, a mistake by Brentford, and he capitalizes on it. It didn't really matter as long as he scored. I felt it was really important that he scored because he just needs that momentum to keep going and going. And then he goes into Manchester United on Sunday, and who's to say he won't get another goal there?
There's a brilliant stat that I saw on Saturday night, and it's that Miggy's now got 4 goals this season for Newcastle, and he's matched his best ever goal scoring season in a Newcastle shirt with 4 goals. It took him 34 games to reach it in 2019. It took him 36 games to reach it last season. I mean, it's proof now. He's done it in 9 games. He's clearly improving at a rate of knots. And we just need to hope, that it isn't another false dawn that we've seen with Miggy. As you said, he scored last season against Palace. We all thought, right, he's going to end the season on a real high, and he just doesn't back it up. But he looks a different player. He does. And I think, you know what it is? He had a fantastic preseason, a really good preseason with Eddie Howe, who spent a lot of time working on his game. And you thought, right, he's had this brilliant preseason. Let's see him back it up. And to his credit, so far, he has.
What was really interesting to see is the way they pressed Brentford. Eddie Howe's clearly done the homework, and right from the off, they were just in Brentford's face, and you could see Brentford just were not comfortable with it, and 2 goals came from Newcastle's pressing. And the effort the likes of Murphy, Almiron, and Wilson put in to put the frighteners on Brentford was really, really something special. And you've got to, their fitness levels and just, mentally as well, to be that in sync with each other and to know what you have to do. It's just huge credit to Eddie Howe for laying out exactly where he wants the players, and then credit to the players for following the instructions.
The team intensity you see now, and Eddie Howe talks about it all the time, intensity is our identity and all this, but every time Brentford have the ball in their own half, they don't have a minute to get on the ball. Pressing from the front, Wilson, Murphy, and someone's mentioned in the comment here about Longstaff and about him not being up to the level, and he wants to know our thoughts. I think Longstaff in possession is sometimes sloppy. I think when it comes to that side of the game, I don't think he's quite at the level. He's nowhere near Bruno. He's probably not as good as Willock. But one thing I really do like about Longstaff, and I think the reason he keeps getting in this team is because, a bit like Miggy, he's always grafting. And he's for me, I think he's the player in the midfield that does the hassling and he hurries players, he hurries the opposition. And I think if you're going to have one positive for Sean Longstaff's game, I think that's it. And I know you're shaking your head here, but I do think that's his best quality.
I would love for him to find a real good level. I just don't see it happening. I think he played all right against Brentford, and he did well against Fulham, but I just don't think he's at the level going forward. And I think his future in that start 11 was always going to depend on Willock finding form. I think now Willock's found the form. Joe Linton will probably come in and replace Longstaff, and then you have Bruno with Willock. Because for me, Joe Linton's been the most consistent performer this season. So, he was only kept out of the team really because of how well they're performing against Fulham. And we know Eddie Howe doesn't really like to change a losing side. But then if you look at the players who didn't quite reach the level on Saturday, and you don't want to pick on anyone, but for me, it was Longstaff and Dan Burn. And I think if you're picking your strongest 11 and everyone's fit, then you will go Bruno, you will go Joe Linton, and then people might even say Shelvey, but in terms of the pecking order, for me, Longstaff is behind Willock, Shelvey, and then obviously Bruno and Joe Linton.
Yeah, I would agree, and I don't think that my praise for him isn't me saying that I think he should be in this team, and I think as soon as Joe Linton's back and fully up to speed, I think Longstaff is the one to drop out. I agree with you on that. It's such a shame because Longstaff has these sort of spells, a bit like Miggy did last season, where he has a couple of games where you think, this is the form I really want to see. Last season against Arsenal, he was brilliant towards the end of the season. He was brilliant at Burnley on the last game of the season. He's had a couple of games this season, he's good against Liverpool, but then he just doesn't back it up. And he's had a really, really big chance in the earlier part of this season to really stake a claim.
I don't think he's done enough.
Team. And he hasn't. And I think the difference between him and Willock in recent games is that Willock's really said, right, Joe Linton's coming back soon, Shelvey's back in training soon, I need to step it up. And Willock, the last two games, I thought he was better against Fulham than he was against Brentford, but I think over 2 games he performed well. I think he outperformed Longstaff. And I just don't think Longstaff's taken that opportunity. And I think, Longstaff's had the opportunity to move away from the club. He hasn't taken it. Eddie Howe's given him this new contract, but I think Longstaff's future at the club is being a squad player who fills in when other midfielders aren't fit.
Dan Burn is another one I mentioned there who I felt was really sloppy in possession. He was getting outpaced at times. He did what he needed to do, but I was not impressed at all with him. And I do wonder, it's a question I'll put to you, Aaron, is whether the likes of Longstaff and Dan Burn, as hard as they might try to block it out, they know that they have to be performing 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 to keep out Matt Target at left back, and then one of those midfielders we've mentioned. They know that they're not first choice, and I just wonder if that's starting to creep into the games a little bit, maybe, or is that a bit unfair?
I don't think I would put Burn in the same category as Longstaff, because I think has Burn missed a game this season? I'm not actually sure he has.
Yeah, I think he hasn't started one.
Because I think, Botman's been fantastic. I thought he's really good again on Saturday. I think he steadied himself after a bit of a nervy start. But I think you could still make the argument that Burn would sometimes start above him. I think Eddie Howe's said that in previous press conferences, that he really does rate Burn and he likes the partnership him and Cher have got. Saturday, I didn't think he was at his best. I thought he was quite sloppy in possession, which is where Target sort of excels. You know, he's very, very good at getting attacks going down that left. David Allison said here in the comments, would you start Longstaff instead of Burn? And I think, sorry, Longstaff instead of Burn, Target instead of Burn, sorry. And I think
I would.
if they're both fit at left back, I think you go Target.
But I don't think but I think then Burns on the bench. I don't think you start him in place of Botman or Cher.
Yeah, I think. Look, yeah, probably. I think if they're all fit, I think that would be my back four in the sense that Botman and Cher partner each other at the back, and then we've got Target at left back. But I think before Saturday, I don't think Burns really put a foot wrong this season.
No, he hasn't.
And I think look, it's obviously it's always recency bias, isn't it? And he has a bad game, you think, oh well, is he at the level? But I actually think he's had a really good start the season. He wasn't at his best on Saturday, but he's been put into that left back position. And well, Thomas Black has made a good point there. He will have off days, but when was the last time we had a back line that was so big? And it's true. I think he's had a good start the season. He wasn't at his best Saturday. And if Target's back up to speed and back to full fitness, he should probably come back in against Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He's had a good season, start to the season, and I just made the point and try and delve a little bit deeper into it because of the fact that if Target is fit, you then you ask the question, and my point being is that if Target is fit, you then look at how Burn performed on Saturday, and it was an off day. Do you treat it in isolation, or do you go over the whole of the season? Or who's first choice left back is probably the question.
I mean, I would say it's Matt Target. I think he is. I think one question that we were talking about in the press area before the game was Dummett and Jamal Lewis must be looking at this thinking, what on earth can we do? Because Dan Burn's been shifted out there the last two games when Target has been in there. I think if it comes to push comes to shove, I think Target's the first choice left back. We're just not too sure if he can sort of overcome this recent injury that he's picked up.
It's just nice to be talking about decent options, though, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Look, Burns came in and had a really good spell at left back. I think you can see why Graham Potter used him there so much at Brighton. A brilliant option to have, but I think Saturday showed you that it's not his natural position where he shines more. I think it's clear that he's a centre back by trade.
And Steve Hinton there asks, can he send any way back for Lascelles? I mean, to be fair, he was there against Liverpool, wasn't he? And I thought he had a decent enough game. I think we'll probably see him maybe in cup games. Unless there's injuries or suspensions, I can't see him, ousting Cher, Botman, or Burn in that centre-back role. And it's just all about what he wants to do next, I guess, in his career. Does he remain and want to be part of it and play every now and then? Or does he go and find some first-team football for the remainder of his career?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Look, I thought, credit where it's due, I thought he came in against Liverpool. Everyone thought it was going to be a pasting, and he did really, really well. He had a very, very assured performance. But I don't think, there's any will that he comes back in and plays so well that he keeps Cher or Botman or Burn out the team. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It just depends what he wants to do. There was lots of talk in the summer about, how Nottingham Forest seemed like the fairy tale move for him, going back to that
club.
They
don't sign that many players, do they?
Yeah, true. Well, I'm surprised he didn't get in that team, given the signed 22 others. But yeah, I don't think there's any way he comes back into this first team unless, there's injuries or other resting players for the cup.
Got John Askew there saying that he'd love Murphy to move his game up to the next level, but not sure he can do it. I hope he can. Yep, I hope as well. Be great to see another Newcastle United supporter, make it at Newcastle United. And just on going back to the discussion about centre backs there, what was really impressive is that for the large part they kept Ivan Toney quiet, and he is a fantastic player. If he ended up back at Newcastle in the summer, I don't think anyone would complain at that. He's strong, he's quick, he just knows where the goal is, and early on, first 5-10 minutes, he won a few headers, and you were starting to think, oh, goodness me, because those first headers are really important. You as a centre-back, you want to win the first couple of headers, the couple of aerial duels, and Toney, to his credit, seemed to beat them in the air. But after that, they were just, they were just strong around him. They were close to him, not letting him turn. And to keep someone of his level quiet, you'll take that.
Yeah, definitely. I thought he, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I think there was just that first 15, 20-minute period before Brentford scored where you just weren't too sure which way the game was going to go. And I thought he started the game well. Him and Mbeumo really linked up well up top for Brentford. But yeah, really, really, I thought Botman was really, really good against him. He didn't give him an inch. Unlucky to concede the penalty. I thought, Dan Burn didn't really know much about it. But Tony just seems to have this weird knack of scoring penalties. He's got a really weird technique where he doesn't really take a run up, and he gets loads of backlift on it.
He seems to have taken another step back with it, because he definitely. I was expecting him to take the shortest of run ups, but he seemed to take an extra couple of steps.
But yeah, look,
it works.
Really good penalty. A lot of people will say that it was a mistake to get rid of him, but I don't think anybody saw him becoming this good of a player. But yeah, really good to see that he didn't really have things his own way on Saturday.
So comments there, Steve saying for me, Tony is like a Wilson player for me. What did you make of Wilson on Saturday? I thought he looked a little quiet. He very nearly scored. It was a good effort, and he did the running, but I didn't think he was at the level that he can be. But I guess he's still. Can he really be match sharp?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did okay. I thought, look, we've touched on it. He did brilliant for the second goal for Murphy. But there was a moment in the second half where Trippier dinked that lovely free kick over the top, and he held off his man. And on another day, he'd always be hitting the target, and he didn't. He wasted a good chance in the first half when Murphy and Miggy were sort of asking it, and he went alone, and his shot was blocked. Look, we're so used to Callum Wilson being one of those players that always performs really well. And I think all of a sudden when he doesn't play up to that level, we're all sort of taken aback. It was quite unusual. But I thought he, his team play was good. He linked up well. And look, it was just one of those days where it didn't work in front of goal for him.
And when Bruno scored his second goal, that long range drive, Willock inadvertently took out Wilson, and there was a moment where my heart sunk because he went down. It took a little while to get up. He didn't get involved in celebrations, and for a little while after that, he was rubbing his knee, I think it was, and I'm thinking, oh goodness me. So even though he's had a quiet day, I'm still thinking that, sitting there thinking, please, don't be injured.
Every time he went down, even if it was just for 3 or 4 seconds, every time he went down, you just hold your breath, don't you? Because you think he might not get up. Yeah. And I think we're so used to him going down and struggling with these injuries that we just want to wrap him in cotton wool. So yeah, look, we need to try and keep him fit. I think it was good that he didn't play a full game. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Let me point you guys in the direction of our Takeover special podcast in case you haven't heard it. I got together a group of fans who answered a few questions on the last 12 months of the current ownership. We're going to stop calling it new ownership because it's been a year and we need to stop calling it new. Some really great answers. It was a discussion between me and Aaron with the view of these fans thrown into the podcast. So that'll be on the podcast channel. Please do tune in. I hope it gives a nice rounded view of the last 12 months, the controversy of Saudi ownership or co-Saudi ownership, as well as all the positive aspects of things that have happened in the last 12 months, the signings, Eddie Howe, the community involvement from the club's owners. So loads discussed. Please do give that a listen. The return of Alan St-Maximin.
Yeah, good to see that he got a couple of minutes on the belt. I thought, he's back to his usual self, picking the ball up, looking dangerous down that left channel.
There was a moment when he sent, I don't know who it was, but he sent
someone
to the cleaners, didn't he?
Yeah. Look, it was good to see that he's back and his confidence hasn't taken a knock. He was driving at players, cutting inside, really, really good. And someone made the point earlier in the comments, sorry, I'm not sure who it was, but if he's back up to speed and he's fully fit, I think you've got to throw him back in from the start against Man United.
I think we'd have a lot of fun against Manchester United.
Yeah, same. Because
he seems to raise his game against the so-called top sides.
And I think when you look at how, defensively fraught Manchester United have been at the back at times this season, Dalot and Shaw and Malacia don't look too settled at the minute. I think, they could potentially cause some damage Old Trafford on Sunday with him and Miggy in the form.
Joe Linton, we briefly discussed it, but he came on to the pitch, and I thought pretty much just picked up where he left off, really.
Yeah, decent performance. It was interesting to see that he got put on at left wing at first, in attack. I think that was probably just to shore up the team a bit and give them a bit more defense from the front. I thought it was good to see that he came through unscathed. I think both of them were probably, given what we spoke about with Eddie Howe after the game, I think they were both fit enough to start, but Eddie Howe, we know he doesn't like to take too many risks, and he'll have wanted them both to just be wrapped in cotton wool. But yeah, I could imagine them, touch wood, if they don't suffer any setbacks this week, they'll be back in from the start at Old Trafford.
And I mentioned for War Flags, they went ambitious, they went big, didn't quite come off, but you've got to give them credit for trying something new and something different. That yellow ticker didn't quite work as they'd pleased, but the effort they went into, they've been planning that for the last couple of weeks, and the banner that went over the Gallagher looked excellent. Nice to see the Chronicles front page on a part of it. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought it was good. As we touched on, it was a shame to see the yellow ticker didn't work as it good. I thought the TalkSport line was good though, and I think it was a good idea. And look, I think it was just good to have War Flags back, mainly because we saw obviously before
it wasn't just the 12-month anniversary of new ownership; it was the 12-month return of War Flags.
Yeah, and I think we saw against Bournemouth. When War Flags weren't there because of the Queen's passing, it didn't really help the atmosphere. Whereas when they're at the game and everyone's got the flags, it does help the team. So yeah, I thought it was a good display.
We'll finish then on talking about Alexander Isak. We've got Dan Kane there asking, do we think we'll see Isak and Wilson on the field together? I would say probably not against Manchester United. I think Roger Cook makes an excellent point as well. If it's not fixed, if it's not broken, you don't need to fix it with, he's talking about the team there. So I don't think we'll maybe see many changes. I know we've just seen Alan at maximum, but, can you see too many changes against Manchester United, really, if any?
I think there'll be a couple of changes, but not too many. As we've said earlier in the show, I don't think Eddie Howe likes to change a winning team, does he? Which is probably why we saw no changes on Saturday. Isak, from what we know, he's back running on grass, but he hasn't actually, trained fully with the team yet. There's a hope that he can get back into sort of a group training session this week. Knowing Eddie Howe and how cautious he is with injuries like this, I don't think we'll see him at Manchester United. Definitely not from the start. And then obviously, we've had this conversation to death already, but when he's fully fit, it's then interesting to see what he does. Does he partner him with Wilson? Does he replace Wilson? Does he have him out on the right? But I don't think that's a question that we'll be having answered before Sunday.
I've got a comment here from Ivan, who is a Norwegian Newcastle United fan. He emailed me with a question, or rather a comment on Alexander Isak. So I'll just read it out, Aaron, and then you can jump in and try and answer his comment / question. So about Isak's goal scoring record, when you look at it last season and compare it to the season before, you have to remember Martin Odegaard went to Arsenal. Sorry, we're there. Yeah, so after a couple of seasons of being loaned out, he finally got the level at La Liga and gave Isak tremendous support. He's talking about Odegaard there. His level of feeding the strikers in the La Liga can in some way be compared to De Bruyne's level in the Premier League. Isak needs someone to feed him, understand his movements so that he can get the ball inside of the box. So essentially saying that Isak, to score goals, needs someone like Odegaard or De Bruyne. Is there anyone in that Newcastle United side currently that you think can link up nicely with Isak, I guess is the question there from our listener?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I don't think they've got someone of De Bruyne's standard in their midfield currently, but I certainly think once he's had a couple of games under his belt with Bruno
Guimaraes,
Trippier, Maxi, I think those are the three players where you look at them and think, once Isak starts playing with those types of players, I think, that's when we're going to see the best of him. We spoke to Eddie Howe recently about Isak and about his performances, and he says that he's still very much getting up to speed with the English game. He's very much getting up to speed with how Newcastle United play. And I think the teammates are still figuring out actually where he wants the ball, where he's going to make the runs. There's a couple of times in the home games where I've just sort of taken a minute to watch him and he thinks about making a run and Trippier, our target, hasn't spotted it. So, and you've got to remember, Newcastle have been so blighted with injuries that he hasn't actually played many games with. He hasn't played any with Wilson. He hasn't really played with Maxi or Bruno, enough to really make a decision. So, I think once we get him back with the big players that have been missing in previous weeks, I think that's when we'll see the best of him.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. Wow, Newcastle winning 5-1. I did have a question for you actually. When was the last time Newcastle scored 5 goals at home? Do we know?
Is this you asking me? You're
I'm
not going to
asking
tell
you.
me? I mean, it can't be Sunderland 5-1, can it? Halloween?
No, and Newcastle did beat Spurs, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh, the relegation season. Yeah.
If anyone knows the answer to that, let us know. I think it must have been that.
Yeah. It was the last game, wasn't it? When
Yeah.
they'd already been relegated. Yeah, that's probably a shout. Maybe in the championship season.
No, we'll discount the championship season. And the last time they scored this many goals in 2 consecutive games was back in 2009. It went when that's Sir Bobby, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Sir Bobby. Yeah, they've never scored 4 goals in back-to-back.
Look at that.
Games.
We were right.
Yeah.
We were right. It was Spurs. Yeah. Thank you for the answers there, Billy and L. Stapleton. Well, that was my final actual home game before I get married. I've been banned from going to mass gatherings for the next few weeks, except my actual wedding. So nice to go out on a high. Thanks to Eddie and Bruno for doing that.
I think they've listened to the podcast and they realised it was going to be your last home game and thought we need to put on a show for
last
Musgrove,
home game until 2023.
Really?
Really?
Oh, of course, yeah, World Cup. So
I'm not around for New Year.
That's a long time for you to not be at the games, isn't it? Are you sure Lil can't let you go to the last one before the wedding?
Unfortunately, it's all sold out as well.
Of course.
That's the support that Newcastle United have got. Yes, thanks to Toon kind of phrase saying Spurs last game of the season when we were relegated, Mitro got the goal. Also got sent off, as usual with a young Mitro. But thank you guys for tuning in to Everything is Black and White podcast. We do appreciate it as always. Please remember to like and follow the podcast either on our YouTube channel or give the Facebook page a like. Or if you're listening on the podcast channel, give us a follow and subscribe. And we shall bring you all you need to know about Newcastle United over on chroniclelive.co.uk. Thank you very much for tuning in.